Arizona Territory, 1881. That night, Cole caught a stranger's trembling hands stealing bread from his kitchen shelf, and by sunrise her desperate plea would change his life forever. The high desert around Larkspur had a way of going so still after midnight that Cole Bennett could hear his own pulse in his ears, and that was exactly the silence that woke him, not the wind working the shutters, not some fox worrying the henhouse, but a sound too careful to be either. A single floorboard, groaning under a foot that did not want to be heard. Cole had lived alone on the cottonwood spread for 6 years, long enough to know every creak his house made in its sleep, and this one belonged to no ghost he recognized. He came up off the mattress without a sound, pulled his trousers on in the dark, and lifted the oil lantern from its hook rather than the rifle leaning by the door, some old instinct telling him this was not a threat that wanted killing. He went down the stairs the way he always did, skipping the 3rd step from the bottom because it sang like a barn cat when weight found it wrong, and by the time his boots touched the packed earth floor of the hall, his heart had climbed clean into his throat. Lamplight from the kitchen doorway laid a thin gold seam across the dark. Someone was inside his house. He crossed the last few feet and raised the lantern, and there at his own table, in a wedge of moonlight through the window, stood a woman with a half-loaf of bread clutched against her chest, wrapping it fast and clumsy in a length of torn cloth, her whole body shaken like a branch in a gale. "What are you doing in my house?" She spun, and the bread hit the floorboards with a soft, terrible thud, and her eyes came up to his, wide, dark, and so full of raw animal fear that Cole nearly stepped back from it himself. She was young, he thought, though hunger had aged her the way it does, carving hollows under her eyes and along her jaw. Her black hair hung loose past her shoulders, tangled with hay dust, and her clothes were worn thin and stained with the red dirt of the flats. An Apache woman, alone, in his kitchen at 2 a.m, holding his bread like it was the last solid thing in the world. She did not scream, did not beg, only turned and ran, out through the back door he'd left cracked for the night air, her bare feet slapping the hard-packed yard toward the black shape of the barn. Cole went after her without thinking, lantern swinging wild light across the fence rails, his own breath loud in his ears. He caught the barn door as it swung shut behind her, shouldered it open on its rusted hinge, and lifted the lantern into the dark. What he saw stopped him cold in the doorway. Buried in the loose straw at the back of the stalls, wrapped together under an old feed sack for warmth, were 2 children, a girl no older than 7 with enormous solemn eyes, and a boy who could not have seen more than 5 summers, both of them so thin their collarbones stood out like the ribs of a starved dog. They flinched from the light as one animal, the boy's face crumpling into silent tears, the girl pulling him behind her small body with a fierceness that had nothing childlike left in it. The woman dropped to her knees between the lantern and her children, both hands raised, not in surrender, but in shield. Her voice broke on the word please. "Punish me. Do whatever you want to me. But do not hurt my children. They have done nothing. It was only bread. I am the one who took it." Cole stood in the barn doorway with the lantern shaking slightly in his own grip, and for a long moment nobody in that barn dared move. The girl's arms tightened around her brother. The boy's small chest hitched with a sob he was trying, and failing, to swallow whole. And something in Cole's chest, something he had kept locked down tight for 6 long years, cracked clean open at the sight of them. He had been that hungry once. He remembered it the way a man remembers a fever, in flashes rather than whole scenes, the ache low in his belly that never fully left, the shame of watching other boys eat while he stood at the edge of a ranch yard hoping for scraps, the particular indignity of being 7 years old and already understanding that the world did not consider you worth feeding. Elias Cordell had been the one to change that for him. An old rancher with no sons of his own who had looked at a starving orphan mucking stalls for a crust of bread and decided, for reasons Cole never fully understood, that the boy was worth the risk of kindness. Cole had inherited this ranch, this house, these 200 acres of good grazing land, because a stranger had once decided his hunger mattered. He lowered the lantern so the light fell soft instead of hard, and crouched down so he was no longer looming over any of them. "How long have you been hidin' in my barn?" The woman's chin came up, some pride surfacing even through the terror. 4 days. Her voice had gone hoarse, worn down to almost nothing. "We hide by day. At night, when you sleep, we look in your garden, your kitchen, for anything. I am sorry. I am so sorry." And the children's father? Her gaze dropped to the straw. "Gone to the mountain mines, north of here, more than a year past. He swore he would return with money for land of our own. He never came back. We think the mine took him, the way it takes so many." She drew a slow breath that shook on its way in. "We had nothing left. No family who could take 3 more mouths. I did not know what else to do but come to a stranger's kitchen in the dark and pray he would be a decent man." Cole looked past her to the 2 children, who had stopped flinching but had not stopped watching him the way a rabbit watches a hawk that has not yet decided to strike. The girl's arm was still locked around her brother. Her eyes, when they finally met his, held something that struck Cole harder than the fear had, a kind of exhausted ancient bravery no child should have needed to learn yet. He could take all 3 of them into Larkspur come morning and hand them over to Sheriff Coburn, and no one in that town would think twice about it. Most of Larkspur wanted nothing to do with the Apache band still moving through the territory, and a woman caught stealing would find little mercy from men who'd buried friends in the old border wars. That was the easy path, the expected one, but Cole had spent too many nights of his own childhood on the wrong end of somebody else's easy decision to hand this woman the same one now. "What's your name?" She blinked, thrown by the sudden gentleness in the question. "Doli." "Doli." He tried the name slow, testing its shape. "All right, Doli. Here is what is going to happen. Tomorrow at first light you are going to come back to this barn, and you and your children are going to stay. There is work on this ranch, more than I can manage alone. Horses to break, a garden gone half to weeds, fences that need mending before winter. You work, I feed you, and nobody troubles your children while you're under my roof." Doli stared at him as though he had spoken in a language she didn't recognize. "Why would you do this? We are strangers to you. We are Apache. Your people do not want us near." "Some of my people don't," Cole allowed. "I'm not asking them. This is my land, and I decide who eats at my table." He looked once more at the girl and the boy, at the way hope had begun to work its slow way through the fear in their small faces, uncertain and disbelieving, but present all the same. Nobody ought to go hungry with a whole ranch of food sitting 50 yards from where they're sleeping. That is not a kindness I invented, Doli. It's one that was given to me once, by a man who owed me nothing at all. I am only passing it along." Tears stood bright in Doli's eyes, and for a moment she looked less like a woman braced for punishment, and more like one who had forgotten, somewhere along the last hard year, that mercy still existed anywhere in this territory. "I do not know how to repay a kindness this size." "You'll work for it. That's payment enough." Cole rose, brushing straw from his knees, and paused at the barn door. "The girl, the boy, what do I call them?" Doli's hand found her daughter's dark hair. "Aiyana, and my son, Ahiga." Cole nodded once, the way a man nods when a bargain has been struck and does not need repeating. "Aiyana, Ahiga, at sunup when you hear my rooster come to the house, there will be food waiting and a long day of work after it." He walked back out into the desert dark and stood a moment beneath a sky so thick with stars it looked close enough to touch, and found that he did not fully understand what had just moved him to make that offer. He knew only that it had felt in some old and unshakable way exactly right. Behind him in the barn, Doli gathered her children into her arms and wept without any sound at all, the particular silent weeping of a woman who has spent a year learning not to be heard. For the first time since the mines had swallowed her husband whole, something that might have been named hope lit itself, small and stubborn, somewhere behind her ribs. Dawn came up thin and gold over the eastern ridge, painting the desert the color of a struck match, and Doli had not slept at all. She had spent the black hours of the night turning Cole's offer over in her mind, hunting for the trap in it, because a year on the run had taught her that kindness from strangers usually came with a hidden cost worse than the hunger it replaced. But when the rooster finally sounded and she woke her children, she found herself walking toward the ranch house anyway, because the alternative, running again, with 2 children too weak to run far, had stopped being a real choice sometime around midnight. Aiyana's small hand tightened in her mother's. "Mama, I'm scared." A mother's lies only worked on children too young to feel the tremor in a held hand, so Doli gave her the truth instead. "So am I. But sometimes the only way through is to trust, even when trust has hurt us before. I saw something at that man's eyes last night. I do not think it was cruelty." Ahiga pressed his face into his mother's skirt. "Will there truly be food?" The question broke something loose in Doli's chest, because no 4-year-old should ever have to ask it and mean it the way he meant it. "Yes, my love. I believe there will." They stepped out into a ranch yard that took Doli's breath entirely. Corrals holding horses so fine they looked poured from bronze. A garden gone to seed, but still holding good bones beneath the neglect, and a wide white house with a porch that wrapped clean around 2 sides of it. Cole was already at the corral, forking hay to a string of restless horses, and when he spotted them crossing the yard, he set the fork aside and came to meet them, hat pushed back, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Something like relief passed quick across his face before he tucked it away. "You came. Good. Follow me." He led them into the kitchen, where the table Doli had stolen from the night before now held a spread that made both children go utterly still. Fresh bread, eggs scrambled soft, beans stewed with peppers, and a full pitcher of milk sweating in the morning heat. Aiyana's small hand found her mother's sleeve and gripped it, disbelieving. Cole waved a hand at the crowded table. Sit. Eat as much as you want. Nobody's rushing you. Doli hesitated at the table's edge. Mr. Bennett, we do not deserve. Nobody works a full day on an empty stomach on this ranch. He cut in, not unkindly, and pulled a chair back for her himself. Sit down, Doli. The children did not need telling twice. They fell on the food with the desperate, half-frightened speed of the truly starved, as if some part of them still expected it to vanish before they could finish, and Doli watched them eat with tears standing unshed in her eyes, because it had been so long since she had seen either of them look anything close to safe. Cole poured himself coffee and sat across from them, letting the silence stretch until the worst of their hunger had eased. Now, the rules of this ranch, so there's no confusion between us. You'll work hard, but you will not work alone. I work this land every day alongside whoever's on it. 3 meals, same as I eat. The barn is yours until I can build something better suited to a family. The children can play once their small chores are done, but they will have chores, same as anyone earning their keep here. Understood? Yes. Doli's answer came quick. We will work harder than you have ever seen. I promise this. One more thing. Cole set his cup down and looked at her straight. No softness hidden in it now. Larkspur is not going to like this. Some folks in that town buried kin in the old fighting, and they will say ugly things about you being here, maybe worse than words. But this is my land, and I decide who is welcome on it. Do you understand what I am telling you? Doli's throat worked before she could answer. Why do this for us? You do not know me. We are strangers. We are Apache, and your town hates my people. Cole turned his coffee cup slowly between his palms before he found the words. 10 years back, I was nothing. No land, no money, no family left living. A rancher named Elias Cordell gave me a chance nobody else in this territory would. Taught me everything about horses, about this land, about what it means to be a man of your word. When he died, he left me this whole spread in his will, said I was the closest thing to a son he'd ever had. He rose and walked to the window, looking out over the corrals gone gold in the new light. He used to tell me life hands you these chances to pass on what you were given, and a man who wastes that chance doesn't deserve to have been given it at all. You are my chance to honor him, Doli. That is the whole of my reason. After breakfast he walked them across the whole spread, showing them where the tools hung, how the well pump wanted priming before it would draw, how to water the garden rows, so the roots drank deep instead of drowning shallow. Aiyana and Ahiga trailed behind, wide-eyed at every new wonder. A barn cat, a gentle old mare, a rooster that chased Ahiga in a squawking circle until the boy's laughter rang out clear across the yard for the first time in longer than his mother could remember. The horses are the heart of this ranch, Cole explained, running a hand down the neck of a tall bay gelding. I break them and sell them on to outfits across the territory, but I've got 15 head right now, and only 2 hands to manage them. I could use help I can trust. Doli's voice was quiet, but steady. I know horses. My father rode before me. He taught me before the fever took him, and I know the plants that heal, poultices for wounds, teas for fever. I could look at any animal troubling you. Something lit behind Cole's eyes. There's a gray out past the second corral with a leg wound that won't close right. Would you look at it? She knelt beside the limping gray without a moment's hesitation, running gentle fingers along the swollen leg, while the animal, skittish with everyone else on the ranch, went still and calm under her touch, as though it recognized something in her hands that no one else's carried. I will need river willow bark and yarrow if it grows near here. A poultice by evening, changed each morning. 4 days, and the wound closes clean. Cole nodded slow, already thinking ahead. River's 3 miles east. We'll take the wagon out after the noon meal. That first day, something extraordinary crept into the ranch that Doli could hardly let herself trust. Aiyana and Ahiga, who had gone silent and watchful for the better part of a year, began slowly, cautiously, then all at once, to laugh. They chased the barn cat through the hay. Ahiga tried to ride a tolerant old nanny goat and fell off it 3 times running, laughing harder with each fall. Their laughter rang across that dusty yard like something Cole's house had been waiting a long while to hear again, and more than once he found himself simply standing still to listen to it. At midday they ate together on the wide porch in the shade, thick sandwiches, cold well water, fruit from a tree Cole hadn't bothered picking in years. Aiyana studied him over her bread with a child's blunt curiosity. "Mr. Bennett, may I ask you something?" "Go on, little one." "Why do you live here all alone? Don't you have any family?" Doli hushed her daughter, embarrassed, but Cole only managed a small, sad smile and shook his head. "It's all right. I had a wife once. Her name was Eleanor. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, full of more life than this whole territory could hold, and 6 years ago a fever took her in 11 days, and there was nothing any doctor in Larkspur could do to stop it. I've been alone in this house since." He looked out over the yard where the children had gone back to chasing the cat. "It got quiet, too quiet some days." "I am sorry," came Doli's soft reply. He shrugged, though something in the gesture cost him. "Life keeps moving, whether you want it to or not. Work helps, and now you're all here. This house hasn't felt this alive in a long while." That evening, while Doli ground fresh herbs for the gray gelding's poultice, Cole watched the children from the porch rail, Ahiga attempting, with total seriousness, to teach a chicken to follow him in a straight line. Aiyana gathering wildflowers into a small, lopsided bouquet she announced, for her mother's supper table. Something warm moved through Cole's chest that he hadn't felt the shape of in 6 long years. It wasn't love yet. He wasn't fool enough to name it that so soon. But it was, unmistakably, the feeling of a house becoming a home again after a very long silence. As the sun went down, he carried clean blankets and 2 soft pillows out to the barn himself. "Tomorrow we'll start clearing the old tack room next to the stalls. It'll sit warmer and drier than the hay come the first cold snap." Doli's voice caught. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I do not know how a person repays kindness of this size. Work hard, look after my horses, raise your children to be good people. That's payment enough for anything I've given you." That night, as Doli tucked her children into the clean blankets, Aiyana pressed her face against her shoulder. "Mama, do you think we could stay here forever?" Doli pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair and did not trust herself to promise it outright. "I don't know, my love. But tonight we are warm and we are fed, and no one means us harm." She lay awake herself a long while after that, listening to her children breathe easy for the first time in longer than she could remember. If a story like this one keeps you coming back, consider becoming a channel member. Tap the join button beside the channel name to help support us. A week folded into 2, and each morning brought its own small, ordinary miracle. The children woke with color back in their cheeks. Ahiga's ribs stopped showing through his shirt. Aiyana's laughter came easier, quicker, needing less coaxing each day to surface. The gray gelding's wound closed clean on the 4th morning, exactly as Doli had promised, and Cole stood in the corral running his hand down that smooth new hide in something close to wonder. I've never seen a wound heal that fast, or that clean. What is it you know that our territory doctors don't? Doli smiled, grinding a fresh poultice in a stone mortar she'd fashioned from a creek rock. It is not a secret, only listening. My grandmother taught me that the land offers everything a person needs, if you are patient enough to hear what it is telling you. Doli's gift with growing things proved just as uncanny as her gift with horses. Under her care, the half-wild garden came back to life with a vigor Cole had never coaxed from it himself. Tomatoes swelling red and heavy, squash growing fat and pale gold, peppers with a bite that made even Cole's eyes water. Aiyana took to working beside her mother in the rows each morning, small hands growing steadier with each passing week. Ahiga, for his part, found his whole heart given over to the horses, walking fearless among animals twice his size, brushing out their manes, humming some tuneless little song that seemed, somehow, to settle even the most skittish of them. Cole watched Ahiga lead the tall bay gelding across the yard without so much as a lead rope one evening. That boy has a gift. Horses don't trust like that, not with strangers, and rarely even with me. But not every part of those weeks came easy. Word had already begun moving through Larkspur, an Apache woman and her children, living out at Bennett's spread, eating at his table. In the mercantile, conversations dropped away when Cole came through the door. At the saloon, a few men stopped meeting his eye entirely. Cole kept it from Doli, carried it alone the way he carried most things, and kept riding into town each week for the supplies the ranch needed, chin level, refusing to give the whispering the satisfaction of a flinch. One warm evening, while they mended a stretch of fence together, Cole noticed Doli had gone quiet, her gaze fixed on the far mountains with something heavy behind her eyes. "What's troubling you?" Her voice had gone thin. "Tomorrow is Aiyana's birthday. She turns 8 years old, and I have nothing at all to give her. Not even a small thing. When her father was alive, we always marked the day somehow. Now I have nothing." Cole was quiet a long moment, turning something over behind his eyes. "What did she love, before things got hard for you?" Something soft crossed Doli's face at the memory. "Drawing. Her father brought her charcoal once, and she would spend whole afternoons drawing birds, horses, the shapes of clouds on flat stones. We lost everything of it when we were driven off our land." Cole took his time answering. "I think I might have an idea, but I'll need your help keeping it a secret." That night, once the children were long asleep, Cole and Doli worked quietly together by lantern light. Cole brought down an old wooden box from the house that he hadn't opened in 6 years, brushes, paints, good paper, all of it belonging once to Eleanor, who had loved painting the desert at dusk more than any other pastime she'd ever taken up. Cole ran a thumb over the worn handle of a favorite brush. She would have wanted someone to put these to use again. They've sat in that box far too long. Together they built a small folding easel from scrap lumber and old hinges, sized just right for a child's hands, Cole cutting and fitting while Doli sanded every edge smooth and safe. Doli admired the finished piece, low under her breath. It's perfect. She will love this beyond anything. Something shy crept into Cole's voice for the first time since she'd known him. There's one more thing. Follow me. He led her to the far corner of the barn, where something long and low sat draped beneath an old canvas tarp. When he pulled the cover away, Doli gasped outright. It was a small playhouse, sized perfect for 2 children, complete with real glass windows, a working door, and a narrow little porch of its own. Cole ducked his head. I've been building it these last few nights after you'd all gone to sleep. Thought maybe they ought to have some place that was only theirs. Doli could not find words for a long moment, tears slipping free before she could stop them. Cole, this is... She shook her head, overcome. You are far too generous a man. The next morning Aiyana woke to find the easel and a small bundle of new paints resting beside her pillow, and her scream of pure delight woke the entire ranch at once. Ahiga came running to see what the noise was, and soon both children were turning the treasures over in their hands with shining, disbelieving eyes. Cole stood grinning wide in the barn door. Happy birthday, little one. Aiyana hugged the easel to her chest as though it were the single most precious object in the whole territory. There is one more surprise, but you'll need to close your eyes. The children obeyed, giggling with anticipation, and Doli guided them by the hand while Cole walked ahead to stand beside the little house. All right, open your eyes. Both children screamed with joy loud enough to send the horses trotting nervous circles in the corral. They ran to the playhouse at once, touching every wall, peering through every window, opening and closing the small door again and again, as if the magic of it might wear thin if they stopped. Ahiga's eyes had gone enormous. Is it truly ours? All yours, Cole confirmed. Paint it however you like it, Aiyana. Put flowers all around it, if you please. Aiyana threw both arms around Cole's middle with a force that nearly knocked him backward. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. It is the best gift of my whole life. I love you so very much. The words landed on Cole like a physical blow in the best possible way. No one had spoken those words to him since Eleanor died, and he had to blink hard against the sudden burn behind his eyes before he could manage a reply. I love you too, little one, voice rough, and he held her back just as tightly. That whole day passed like something out of a dream. Aiyana painted her little house bright yellow and blue and desert red, while Ahiga managed to get more paint on himself than on any actual surface, and their laughter rang across the ranch clean and constant. That evening, Doli prepared a feast from the garden's bounty, fresh tortillas, beans thick with wild herbs, a rich stew made with meat Cole had bought special for the occasion, and they ate together on the porch as the sky bled orange and violet above the western ridge. Once the children had finally worn themselves out and gone to sleep, Doli's voice found the quiet dark. Today was perfect. Aiyana will remember this for the rest of her life. So will I. Been the best birthday I've stood witness to in years. This house was so empty before you 3 came, Doli. Now it's full of noise and life again. Doli studied him a long moment in the moonlight. You are an an unusual man, Cole Bennett. Not many would have done what you have done for strangers." He looked up at the wide spread of stars. "Maybe. Or maybe you've done something for me, too. You reminded me that a life is more than work and silence, that it's worth opening a door to kindness, even when the whole world tells you not to." Something shifted quietly between them in that moment. Not love, not yet, but the first true root of it. A mutual respect settling into something deeper, an understanding that had no need of words to carry its full weight. Autumn arrived over the cottonwood spread with cooler air, and a sky gone a deeper, cleaner blue, and 4 months had passed since the night Doli first crept into Cole's kitchen for a stolen loaf of bread. 4 months that had rearranged the whole shape of that ranch. Cole's horses were now the most sought-after string in the territory, not merely for his own training, but for the shine in their coats and the soundness of their legs, both owed in no small part to the salves and poultices Doli mixed with her own 2 hands. The garden, too, had grown so abundant that Cole had started selling the surplus at the Larkspur market, though at first folks resisted buying vegetables grown by an Apache woman's hands. Then came the Tuesday morning that broke the quiet wide open. Cole had ridden into town for feed and tools, promising to return well before noon, leaving Doli and the children working the garden rows in the cool of the morning. Aiyana watered the tomato plants with careful, practiced hands. Aiyana chased a butterfly between the squash vines, his laughter carrying clean across the yard. Then came hoofbeats, 3 riders coming in hard and fast, entering the yard without so much as slowing at the gate. Doli recognized the lead rider at once, Grady Kessler, the town butcher, a heavy-set man with a long scar tracking down one cheek, flanked by 2 hired hands from the neighboring spread. Kessler spat into the dirt. "Well, look what we've got here. An Apache and her cubs, living like royalty out on Bennett's land." Doli pulled both children behind her at once, her heart hammering, but she kept her voice level. "Mr. Bennett gave us leave to be here. We work honestly for him." "Work?" one of the hired hands sneered. "Sure you do. Everybody knows your kind steals whatever isn't nailed down. We are not thieves." Doli lifted her chin, dignity steel straight through the fear thrumming under her ribs. "We tend his horses, his garden, his whole spread, and we do it with honest hands." Kessler swung down off his horse, heavy and slow, a big man used to using his size to make a point without needing to raise a fist. "The trouble is, we don't want your kind anywhere near this town. Larkspur was a decent place before Bennett lost his mind and brought you in. What's next? A whole camp of your people squatting on good grazing land." Aiyana had begun crying silently, clutching her mother's skirt. Aiyana trembled, small fists balled at his sides. Doli felt anger climb hot behind her ribs, but she held it, because these men were plainly hunting for any excuse at all to turn ugly. She kept her tone steady as she could manage it. "Please leave. We want no trouble here, only to be left in peace." That cruel smile of his spread wider. "Oh, we'll leave, but you'll be leaving first. Pack up whatever's yours and be gone before Bennett gets back, or things get considerably less pleasant for the 3 of you." At that exact moment, the gray-gelding Doli had healed months before came trotting out of the barn on its own, unbidden, and planted itself squarely between Doli and the 3 riders, ears pinned flat. Then more of the horses came, one after another, forming a rough half-circle around Doli and her children, as though some silent order had passed between them. One of the hands backed his own mount up a nervous step. "What in the hell?" Before Kessler could answer, the sound of a wagon came tearing up the road at speed. It was Cole, returning far earlier than expected, having spotted 3 strange horses tied outside his own house from half a mile off, and known instantly that something was wrong. He hauled the wagon to a stop and was on the ground before the wheels had fully stopped turning, his face gone thunderous with fury. "What in God's name is going on here, Kessler?" Kessler forced an easy smile that did not reach his eyes. "Just came by to talk some sense into you, Bennett. Town's got concerns. My decision to hire good workers on my own land is none of the town's concern." Cole's voice had dropped low and dangerous. "Be reasonable, Cole," Kessler tried. "An Apache woman and her young ones, living out here so close to town. Folks don't know what to expect from her kind." Cole crossed the yard until he stood almost nose to nose with the bigger man. "Let me explain something to you plainly, Grady. Doli and her children have worked this ranch harder in 4 months than you've worked in your whole life put together. They've shown more honor, more dignity, and more plain courage than you and these 2 combined. Now, Cole, I'm not finished." Cole's voice cut clean through whatever Kessler meant to say next. "This is my land. I decide who's welcome on it and who isn't, and right now, the 3 of you are riding off it and not coming back." One of the hired hands stepped forward, blustering something about rights, and the gray gelding screamed and struck the ground with the forehoofs so hard the whole yard shook with it. The other horses did the same, stamping and snorting in unison, and all 3 riders took a nervous step back at once. Cold humor edged Cole's voice now. "Seems my horses agree with me. I'd mount up and ride, gentlemen, before they decide to make their opinion a good deal more physical." Kessler looked around the yard and saw, plainly, that he had lost whatever ground he'd ridden in with. "This isn't finished, Bennett. The whole town's going to hear about this." Cole stood with his arms crossed over his chest. "Let them hear it. And tell every last one of them this. Besides, any man who rides onto my land to threaten my people answers to me directly, and I will not be nearly so polite about it the second time." The 3 men rode off in a hurry, Kessler shouting some final threat back over his shoulder that got lost in the dust of their own retreat. Once they'd vanished down the road, Cole turned to Doli, who stood trembling, both children still gathered close against her skirts. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you, or the children?" "No." Doli's voice had gone small. "You came in time. But Cole, perhaps it would be better if we left. We do not wish to bring this trouble down on you and your whole town." "Trouble?" Cole shook his head firm. "Doli, listen to me carefully. You and your children stay here as long as you wish it. I do not care one bit what Kessler thinks, or what the rest of Larkspur whispers about it. This is my land, and you are welcome on it for as long as you want to stay." Aiyana let go of her mother's skirt and ran to Cole instead, wrapping both arms tight around his legs. "Thank you for keeping us safe, Mr. Bennett." Cole knelt down to meet her eyes directly. "Nobody is going to lay a hand on either of you while I'm standing here, little one. That is a promise I intend to keep." Ahiga followed his sister's lead, and Cole found himself with 2 small children clinging tight to him at once, both of them crying now from sheer relief rather than fear. Something in his chest gave way entirely, some old wall he hadn't realized he was still keeping up. Doli watched it happen with tears sliding freely down her cheeks. This man, this stranger she'd once caught herself stealing bread from in the dark, had just risked his whole standing in this town to keep her children safe. Mr. Bennett. Her voice had dropped soft. I have no words large enough to thank you for what you have just done. Cole rose slowly, one child still hooked to each leg. You don't need words for it, Doli. Just keep being the good, hard-working woman I've watched all these months. That's more than enough. That night, after the children had finally fallen asleep, Doli and Cole sat together on the porch beneath a sky gone thick with stars. Doli's voice stayed quiet in the dark. It's going to get worse before it gets better. That town will not simply let this go. I expect you're right, but I've spent a long while living alone out here, doing what other folks expected of me, keeping to rules I never chose for myself. Elias Cordell used to say a man isn't measured by how much land he holds or how much money sits in his strong box. He's measured by how he treats the people who cannot defend themselves. He looked over at her, something steady and certain in his face. You are a good man's kind of chance, Doli, and I don't intend to waste it. Soft under the stars, the words came anyway. You are a good man, Cole Bennett. I don't know that for certain, but I know this much. You're staying. And whatever comes at us from that town, we will face it together, the four of us. 2 weeks passed after Kessler's failed threat, and though the town went on murmuring, no one else rode out to trouble them directly. Cole kept making his weekly trips into Larkspur, facing down cold stares and low murmurs in the mercantile, but he never once lowered his eyes or turned his wagon around early. Meanwhile, something quiet and fine kept unfolding on the ranch itself. Doli's garden produced vegetables so rich and full that even the most stubborn skeptics in town began slowly to change their minds once they'd actually tasted them. Cole came back from the market one evening with an empty wagon bed. Mrs. Osgood bought 3 whole baskets today, announced to the whole mercantile she'd never tasted squash that sweet in her life, loud enough for half the town to hear it. Doli smiled, slicing carrots for the evening meal. The earth is generous to those who treat it gently. My grandmother taught me that lesson well before I could walk it myself. Aiyana, meanwhile, had filled 3 whole notebooks with drawings, the ranch, the horses, the far blue mountains, each one showing a talent well beyond her 8 years, catching small, true details most grown eyes overlooked entirely, like the exact way morning light lay along a horse's back. Ahiga, for his part, had grown into something close to a small legend among the horses, calming even the most nervous animals with nothing more than a quiet word and a steady hand. Not everything turned easy, though. Kessler and his men kept the rumor mill grinding, and a few Larkspur merchants still refused Cole certain goods outright. But slowly, other cracks began showing in the town's resistance. One week the town blacksmith, a broad, quiet man named Amos Fenwick, showed up at the ranch gate holding his coughing 8-year-old grandson. Awkward, half ashamed to be asking at all, he got the words out anyway. Word is, your woman knows medicine plants. Town doctor's given up on the boy. Please. Doli examined the boy carefully, recognizing the illness at once, and brewed a strong tea from herbs gathered near the river, sweetened with wild honey. 3 cups daily, 6 days running. The cough will clear entirely. 6 days later, Fenwick returned with a grandson running and laughing, cough gone completely, and a set of hand-forged horseshoes as thanks. He shook Doli's hand firm. I don't rightly know how to repay you. I spoke ugly words when you first came here. I was dead wrong about you." Doli kept it simple. Children bear no blame for the mistakes grown folks make, and every person deserves the chance to heal regardless of where they came from. Word of the cure spread through Larkspur quickly after that. A woman plagued by headaches came seeking help, a farmer with a wound refusing to close, an old man crippled with pain in both hands. Doli treated each of them without asking a single coin in payment, taking only what folks could spare, eggs, sometimes only a grateful word. If this story of mercy and family has moved you, tap join beside the channel name and become a channel member. It truly helps this channel keep going. One Saturday afternoon, while Cole worked repairing the barn roof and Doli planted flowers around the children's little painted house, the sound of many horses approaching brought Cole down off the roof in a hurry, certain more trouble had come calling. But when he saw who was riding in, his breath caught entirely differently. It was Sheriff Coburn himself, riding alongside Mrs. Osgood, Amos Fenwick, and a dozen more townsfolk behind them, wagons loaded down with lumber, tools, and supplies. Coburn's gray mustache twitched with something like nerves. "Bennett, we've come to speak with you." Doli gathered her children close, bracing instinctively for the worst, but Cole planted his boots and crossed his arms. "Say your piece." Mrs. Osgood stepped forward first, an older woman well respected across the whole territory. "Cole, we've come to apologize, and to help if you'll let us." "Help?" Cole frowned, honestly thrown. Fenwick went next, gruff and plain. "We've been fools, the lot of us, prejudiced fools. That woman has shown this town more kindness and generosity than most of us have managed in our whole lives combined. She healed my grandson, eased Mrs. Osgood's pains, helped half the folks here who came asking, and we treated her like dirt for it." A voice rose from somewhere in the crowd behind him. "We judged her without ever knowing the first true thing about her. That's why we're standing here now." Sheriff Coburn's mustache finally settled into something like a smile. "We've come to build Doli and her children a proper house. 2 rooms, a real kitchen, good windows. They cannot go on living out of a barn, however fine that barn might be." Cole felt his own throat tighten hard, and could only manage a nod before his voice came rough. "Doli, come on out here. Bring the children with you." Doli came forward slowly, Aiyana and Ahiga gripping tight to each of her hands, uncertain and wary still of the crowd gathered in the yard. Mrs. Osgood crossed to her directly, hand extended. "Doli, I'm Margaret Osgood, and I was cruel to you before I ever knew you. I judged you unfairly, and I am asking your forgiveness for it." Doli looked at that outstretched hand a long moment, then at the sincerity plain in the older woman's eyes, and finally took it. Quiet, but certain. "We all deserve a second chance. That much I have learned firsthand." Fenwick stepped in before the quiet could stretch too long. "That's exactly why we're here. We mean to build you a real house starting today, if you'll allow us the honor of it." Tears slid down Doli's face freely now. "I do not know what words could answer this kindness. Thank you. Thank you, all of you." For the next 4 weeks the whole town turned out together. Men cut and raised timber, fitted windows, framed walls square and true. Women brought food, sewed curtains, stitched quilts thick enough for the coming winter. Larkspur's children came out to play alongside Aiyana and Ahiga, forging friendships that would carry on for years past that single autumn. The house rose fast and sturdy, 2 good rooms, a real stove in the kitchen, a wide porch, painted clean white with blue shutters, standing 60 yards off from Cole's own house, close enough to remain part of one family, far enough to grant Doli and her children a home entirely their own. The day the house stood finished, the whole town gathered to celebrate it properly, bringing food, music, small gifts for every member of the family. Aiyana received a fresh stack of notebooks and paints. Ahiga was given his very first real cowboy hat, which he refused to take off even at supper. Doli received new cookware, hand-stitched blankets, and plates painted with desert wildflowers. Sheriff Coburn raised his voice to the gathered crowd. "Welcome to this community, properly. Doli and her children now belong to Larkspur, same as any other family here. And any man who treats them poorly going forward answers to me and to this whole town besides." That night, once the last wagon had rolled off down the road, Doli and Cole sat together on the porch of the new house, while the children slept soundly in their own beds for the very first time, under clean sheets in rooms built just for them. Doli looked around at the warm lamplight filling her own kitchen, voice hushed with wonder. "I can hardly believe this is real. 4 months ago, I was stealing bread from your table to keep my children breathing. Now I have a house, friends, an entire community standing behind me." Cole's answer came low and certain. "You earned every bit of it, with your kindness, your work, your whole enormous heart. You showed this whole territory exactly who you are, Doli, and it finally saw you clear." Doli turned to look at him fully then, moonlight silvering the strong, quiet lines of his face, and found she no longer needed to guard the feeling rising in her chest the way she'd guarded it these 4 long months. "Cole Bennett, I came into your life stealing bread in the dark, certain you would turn me over to men who wished us harm. Instead, you gave me back a life I had stopped believing I deserved." "You gave me one right back," he said, voice gone rough and quiet. "This house was a hollow, silent place before you 3 walked into it. I did not know how much I'd been merely surviving in it until you filled it up again with noise and laughter and something that finally felt like a family." He reached for her hand where it rested on the porch rail, and she did not pull away from it. Beneath a sky heavy with stars, in a yard that now held 2 houses, 2 children finally safe, and horses that had chosen, on their own, to stand guard over a woman who had once had nothing at all, Cole Bennett and Doli sat together in the kind of quiet that no longer needed filling with anything but each other. In the seasons that followed, Larkspur came to know the Bennett Ranch not as the place where a rancher had once foolishly taken in an Apache woman and her children, but simply as home, Cole's home, Doli's home, Aiyana's and Ahiga's home. 4 lives woven together out of one desperate night, and one man's decision to answer hunger with mercy instead of judgment. Aiyana's paintings eventually hung in the front window of the Larkspur Mercantile, admired by the very people who had once refused to buy vegetables grown by her mother's hands. Ahiga grew into the finest young horseman the territory had ever seen, exactly as Cole had once predicted he would. And Doli, who had arrived in the dead of night with nothing but 2 starving children and a stolen loaf of bread, found herself, in time, standing beside Cole Bennett as something far more permanent than a hired hand or a stranger given shelter, as the woman who had turned a quiet, grieving house back into a home. and stayed to keep it that way, together, for every single day that followed.